All right. Have you ever had one of those weeks in trading where nothing seemed to work? Like, the A plus setups that you did take, maybe you took partials or broke even on, and they didn't end up working out. And the B setups that you skipped were the ones that actually ran without you. One of those kind of weeks where, you end up looking at your results for the week and you just kind of wonder if you still got your edge. That was the week that I had. And you can see it here on my screen. There is nothing impressive about my week at all. But what I want to share with you today is that I have data to back up how normal this actually is. And I think there's a big misconception within the trading community that every week needs to end up green. And it gets confusing because, you see people posting on social media, they're up X amount today or X amount this week. And then your week maybe wasn't the same. And so you feel like you don't know what you're doing. You feel insufficient. You feel like, your system's failing, or, you got to do something about that. So yeah, like look at this week here that I had. And I want to tell you why this is completely normal here in just a minute. But just to go over my week real quick, Monday is just a break-even trade. Price was moving so fast, I shorted out. I went break even on a trade so I could collect myself and get my TP and stop loss in correctly. And I got knocked out before I could even think straight. And that's been a pattern with 930 open on NQ this week. I got a partial on this trade, but I actually risked a little too little on this trade, just kind of the way that it played out. And then Wednesday, I took 2 full-size losses in a row. And then Thursday, similar to this, like I took a partial win, so I didn't even get a full R on this trade here. And then I got stopped out at break even for my runner. And then today, I got basically break even or a slight profit, similar kind of thing. Price was moving so fast that I ended up, it ran through my take profit without me having enough time to set it. And so I just exited a couple contracts to take my profits and set my stop loss at break even, came back and got me. So just a really weird week where kind of nothing was working for me. But as I said earlier, that's something to be expected. And I have 6 months of data that I've looked at to back this up. And I want to show this boring chart. And I know this stuff is boring. I know it's not sexy. But this is the stuff that's really been helping me lately. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. And it's really helped with my confidence. And I hope that in sharing it, that it can give you some confidence too. But basically what I looked at on this chart, and I'll explain it here in a minute, I wanted to understand what's the percentage of chance of a outcome for a week. And so I looked at 6 months of data here, and I wanted to know, like this middle column, for example, is like, what are the odds that I'm going to break even? And what we can see here is I found that there is a 17% chance that I'm going to break even on the week. And then to the right is profitable, where, I see some slight profits, some reasonable profits, and then amazing profits. And then to the left of this is a spectrum is there's a slight loss on the week. There's some loss. And then it was just a really poor week, basically just on a losing streak. And so from left to right, what we can see here is I have a 4% chance of one of those really, really terrible weeks, an 8% chance of a significant loss for the week, a 21% chance of a slight loss in the week. Overall, the chances, if we look at this bottom highlighted column or row right here that says 33%, overall, there's a 33% chance that I'm going to have a red week, and it's going to be one of these three. I obviously already told you 17% chance of a break-even week, and this is the column that I'm falling into this week. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's an 8% chance of slight profit, a 21% chance of reasonable profit, and a 21% chance of amazing profit, giving me a total of 50% chance of a profitable week. Obviously, we can see that the 50% is higher than the 33%, so I know I'm more likely to have a green week than a red week. But just to even here visually understand the spectrum of possibilities for an outcome of your trading system and how it's skewed, for me has been really helpful in just kind of reframing the week. Previously when I would get a week like this, and then in the case of this week, I switched to leading with a funded account in my copy trading, and I reduced risk because I wanted to go into this new month and new week with as little pressure as possible. So until I get some better results than this, I'm not going to increase my risk on this account, but I'm also not worried at all. And then previously, what I would typically do is I would start to go into my trades, I would review them, I would try to find patterns, and I did do that real quick. I looked at my week and I said, okay, is there anything here that I see that I'm obviously doing really wrong? And I couldn't find that. I saw some crappy market conditions. I saw B setups that were working and A setups that were failing. And so I'm able to look at this week here and not really have any attachment to it at all. I'm going to go into the weekend. I'm not going to be thinking I can't trade. I'm not going to be thinking, stressing out about what to do and how to fix my system, because I can just chalk this week here up to one of these break-even weeks, and that's okay. And if we can even see, I want you to notice to the variance within this. In other words, the distribution of outcomes. Because look at this, all this time period here. There is, however many of these weeks where there was no break-even weeks. And then it kind of clustered right here where I had 3 break-even weeks over the course of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So look at that. 50% of my break-evens came within a 6-week window, right? And that's this clustering and this variance. We can't predict when we're going to have any one of these weeks. But what we can see is they kind of can cluster sometimes. And so what I'm saying by that is to even not worry if it clusters. So I know when we look at this calendar here, this week here, the last week in March or the first week in April, we can see there's just $63 on that on profit right there. And then basically break even. So this week was also a break even week. And then this week here was also a break even week. But if we look at the results, I can see, this is relatively consistent results, 72% win rate. The trade expectancy is a little lower than I would like to see it, but we do have a profitable, it's still reasonable. And that's really being dragged down by these results for this week. But what I'm trying to say here is the more you can understand about what to expect and have reasonable expectations, the more likely I think that we are as traders to screw ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot. It's unrealistic to think that every week's going to be green. We have hot streaks, we have red streaks, we have just mediocre streaks. And that's really what this data here is showing. And this to me is what's to be expected within my trading system. And similarly, you're going to have something for your trading system and your metrics and your statistics that are going to show you what's the most likely outcome for a week, what are the possibilities, and what to expect. So hope that makes sense. If that was valuable to you, leave a comment below. I feel like this whole last number of videos, they've been really a lot less about what's going on the charts and my trade setups, and a lot more about kind of like lessons and thoughts behind some of these trades. And that's kind of a lot of what's been on my mind this week is just, it's not been a great week. It's not been a bad week. And I'm just noticing things that are coming up for me. And when I was reviewing this week's performance and today's trading performance, it just caused me to remember that I once pulled up this data and collected all this data here to really just ground my expectation for what my week could be. So yeah, hope that was helpful. If so, comment below. That would be sweet. Thank you.